Okay, so I got the 4 bolts basically removed from the back side. Couple good notes is they are not the easiest to access. They are 14 millimeter, if I didn't mention it before, and I was able to get 3 of them fairly easily with some extensions, and I used an air gun to get them out, but I tried to cheat and use a regular steel socket and busted it in half. So I got the proper socket and, you know, impact socket, and that works correctly. So just be wary, use the right tools for the right job. So I've got those 4 bolts actually not completely out, but detached from the hub. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is go ahead and slide hammer the flange out of the knuckle. Okay, I recently picked up this set, the slide hammer set from Harbor Freight. Very inexpensive, about 59 bucks for the set. Comes with a whole bunch of different adapters and things. Anyways, nice cheap set from Harbor Freight. I'm not going to use it very often, so didn't have to really spend the big bucks on the super nice tool truck set. All right. Also, another thing that I figured out earlier before I even started this job was I wanted to make sure I was able to adapt this to the wheel studs, because the Mitsubishi factory procedure says using Mitsubishi factory special tools, you have to mount a bridge on here first, then you mount your puller plate on it, and then you mount your slide hammer, and then you can pull it out. Well, I was pretty fortunate that this particular adapter fits right over the bolt pattern of the Mitsubishi. Okay, I mean, it's beautiful. That is exactly what I needed. So I'm real happy that that is the way it is. I'm going to go ahead and get this attached, and then we'll slide hammer it out. Okay, you don't have to have it on super tight or anything. You just got to have it on enough so that when the pulling force comes out this way, it's even all the way around, so you're not pulling it off crooked. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and attach the slide hammer. So there it is. It's all attached, ready to pull. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and slide hammer this off. Make a few sharp outward motions, and there's really only about that much flange that's sitting inside the knuckle. So it only really needs to pop out 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch. So here we go. And look at that. One pop. So
one hit wonder.
So that was that. Now we'll go ahead and clean up this area in here where it mounts. Looks like there's a lot of rust. Why don't you bring the camera in a little closer and we'll examine it just a little bit here. As you can see, you have this flange sits right inside this little flange pocket here, and there's a lot of little dust and rust, you know, kind of stuff in there. And you can see the anti-lock brake wheel that rides in there. Okay, actually, yeah. And so we will clean all of this out, and then we'll go ahead and pop in the new flange, the new bearing housing, and button it all back up. Do the reverse of what we were doing. Okay, so here we are, back. Got the old part out, getting ready to put the new part in. I happened to choose, when I was on rockauto.com, I happened to choose the Timken brand. I trust them. Made in the USA, even though it's for a Japanese car. Timken's a brand I trust, and I like everything they do in bearings, so I chose them. It's about $60, I would say, for this part from Rock Auto, plus or minus a few percent here or there. Good quality though, I like them. So we're going to go ahead and get this new bearing mounted in, and then we'll start screwing or bolted it in on the back side there. So it's just reverse of how it came out. You'll feel the splines kind of go in there. Just look in here, make sure. Alright, so it's a little bit off. I could probably stand to move it a little bit clockwise to get it to line up better. Okay, I'm going to pull it out and move it maybe a couple degrees clockwise to try to line it up. Okay, so we're back. I have torqued the bolts on the back side of the new bearing. The torque is 67 foot-pounds, plus or minus 7 pounds, according to the Mitsubishi factory manual. So that is done, and so you can see that the new bearing is in place and it's good to go. But I wanted to point out a couple of things. One is this ABS sensor wire. You've got to be careful when you torque or remove the bolts or retorque the bolts, not to break this wire. Apparently I've looked it up, and a lot of people break this wire when they're trying to do this job. So please be careful of this ABS wire. Okay, you don't want to replace that. That's pretty expensive. Also, over here, this shock body, the lower part of the shock body, is actually in the way of one of the upper bolts that holds the bearing flange in. And it is extremely difficult to get a torque wrench in here to get that particular bolt torqued. And so what I ended up doing was using a longer socket, and not this particular extension for that particular bolt, but the torque wrench plus just this socket, I was able to get in there with enough space and clearance and actually get it torqued to, I ended up doing them all to 70 foot-pounds because I had a plus or minus rating of 7 pounds. So anyways, you know, do what you can with the extensions and the tools you have, but you know, it's kind of tight back there to get a torque wrench, but it's doable. All right, so now we're gonna move on with the rest of the reassembly. I'm gonna go ahead and get the brakes back together, and torque those down, and get the new, get the rotor back on, and get this thing back together. One of the main things, obviously, we got to do is put the nut on, the axle nut. So I'm going to go ahead and get that going. All right. So, and remembering from what we had said before, we want to make sure that that beveled side of the washer is facing outward. All right. I'm going to slip that on. Take the nut, put that back on. So I'm going to hit it with my air gun and get it pretty tight, and then we'll do the final torquing with the torque wrench. Okay. So that's pretty tight, probably close to the torque spec, which is, I believe, let's check it in the guide here. Okay, hang on. Alright, so it's 167 foot-pounds plus or minus 21 foot-pounds. So we're looking at 146 to 188. Anywhere's in between. Alright, so I'm going to just go ahead and dial it up to 170 and go with that. Okay? Now, because we don't have the Mitsubishi tool to hold it's like a spanner that holds these in place while you torque it. Here's the actual tool I will show you. Okay. So Mitsubishi MB990767. Yeah, try to find that tool. Anyways, unless you're a Mitsubishi technician, you're not going to have access to that. Or, you know, maybe you can find it on the, you know, professional market, you know, from a tool supplier. But anyways, what I'm going to do is kind of cheat a little bit, and I'm going to put a pry bar in here and basically brace it against the ground so that it'll keep this axle from turning and allow me to get my final torque. Okay, so now that I finally got it right, basically we're going to use the leverage of this wrench here to hold the axle flange or the hub in place while I put the torque on it. So here we go. Okay, so we were right there. So it's at 170. Good. So I'm done with that. Now we'll put the cotter pin back on. Okay, so the job essentially is complete now. I didn't really show you the reverse of what I did to take off the brake caliper and, you know, put the rotor back on. It's just a matter of pushing that thing back on and then taking the two bolts and putting them back in and torquing them down to spec. Mitsubishi spec for those brake caliper slider bolts are 45 pounds plus or minus 3 foot-pounds. So I snugged them to 45 foot-pounds. That's what I torqued them to. So once again, just to kind of let you know, to reiterate, this ABS wire back here, very delicate. Try your best not to damage it if you can. Not cheap to replace. Also, the lower shock housing is kind of in the way of one of the 4 bearing flange bolts, so you got to use your best judgment in putting a torque wrench and a socket in there to get it torqued down to the 67 plus or minus 7 foot-pounds on that. Just because I like to keep things a little clean, I cleaned off all the brake dust around the caliper and as much as I could with a wire brush, and then I also cleaned these pins or these slider bolts, and then re-greased them with the brake high temp grease so that it would be fresh and new, and it just will operate better that way. And I think that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and call this job done. I got to obviously put the wheel back on and torque that to spec. The wheels are 80 foot-pounds for the Mitsubishi factory alloys. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that now. Thanks for watching. I hope that helps. Sorry, I'm not a professional videographer, and there's probably a few mistakes in there, but I do believe I've got almost everything that's necessary to complete the job. Thanks again for watching.